instead of letting someone else set your strategy for you, you do it. And especially for owners, CEOs, COOs, that's your responsibility. No one else can do it. One of the great relationships that I was able to forge in my time at Maranatha was with the CEO. And it's interesting because not very many universities have a CEO. I loved having a CEO and a president because it allowed there to be this focus of we need to actually manage this institution of higher learning as a business, because our students will not benefit from it if we don't have this thing figured out financially, structurally, in a business format. You can do it. I tell people that your values are not a strategy, because a strategy might change. The tactics of something might change, but your fiber of who your company is should not change.
Yeah.
And what people will recognize in the Vortex situation is that there might be people who call in with stupid reasons and stupid stories, but guess what? There probably are 10 people, 100 people with legitimate claims and who are very willing to spend high prices on quality products that are going to outlast the one guy who comes in with a terrible story. And on a business situation, even if you were to choose this as a strategy, even though it's not a strategy, it would be a winning strategy.
Yeah. This is Sparta! Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick. Hey, and if this is your first time here, welcome. We are a leader-to-leader conversation podcast where we're bringing in high-powered leaders to enlighten, to impact, and to inspire. And today, I got a fellow Wisconsinite in the house.
Yeah, man.
Jonathan Sheeley, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
It's going to be like fireside chat. I love doing the in-person stuff. We get to look eyeball to eyeball, have a good dialogue, and impact some lives.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So let's start with, Jonathan here, an executive coach, and I'll give all his proper intro later, but so you go from being an educator to then an entrepreneur. Yeah. So what's an educator at a Baptist college?
Yeah.
Right. So, and maybe you give the distinction for those that we have in the South. What's the difference between Southern Baptist and First Baptist, right? Yeah. Because Maranatha is First Baptist.
They're
right?
Independent Baptist.
Okay, so there's three. I didn't even know that.
There's like this entire separate flavor.
Okay, cool. So talk about, you go into education right out of college, right?
Yes.
All right. So talk about that journey.
Yeah. So when I was in college, I was actually studying for the ministry. I was going to be a pastor. So I went through 2 theology degrees, which for all intents and purposes is research and writing, right? Because pastors in the Independent Baptist system, you're going to, every week, you're going to be speaking, you're going to be condensing content from the scriptures, and you're going to be delivering it in the form of a sermon. So in some ways, I tell people that I had a research and writing degree. Just all of my content was in theology. And hugely beneficial because I had to read tons, and I got a love for learning out of it. But then when I wanted to get grad school paid for, I was a grad assistant. So I was working in the enrollment offices. And so I started working for a vice president. I got to know administration a little bit. I was basically his personal slave, right? Like that's what a grad assistant ends up being, not on the teaching side, on the staff side. And so I just got a love for recruitment. So I was traveling. I got major props. I got to see 40 different states because of my responsibilities. I was traveling to see other Christian schools and acquiring students. But then I got my first responsibility as a leader out of that. I had the call centers. I had the social media teams. Then when I got really toasted academically, I was like halfway done with my master's program, which was 96 credits, which is just an insane amount of work for a grad program.
Especially writing and research.
Oh my word. I was up to here, right? So I needed to take a break. My wife had just gotten a full-time job as an English teacher. And so I decided to apply for the full-time director of admission role and loved it. So it was connecting people, references, getting them into the right programs, helping them understand what the future could hold for them. Started doing recruitment as well. I was director of student recruitment and admissions. So that was all the sales conversations on the front end, and then the admission conversations, which was let's make sure you're in the right program and get them into the right school of whatever. And just loved the people part, right? I was a conduit. I was helping people with what the future could look like for them, helping allay fears for parents. And I really enjoyed that part. But I also had a large team. And the management part, the leadership of a large, diverse, very separated team geographically, because they were on the road, they were in the office, and I loved that. I found after a few years that my job as the director of recruitment would be easier if the director that was overseeing the marketing aspects would be doing a more advanced operation. So I made a lateral move to the director of communications and loved that even more. So I was working with the executive team. So it was partially Office of the President work, partially marketing work. I got into publishing that way, the magazines, the catalog, all that stuff. I got to see everything of all the content upstream before it got to the students. And that's ministry of multiplication, right? So I'm leading the teams who are going to be leading the kids. And I loved seeing lives changed with tweaks. We upstream as leaders were making program changes. We were making marketing changes that we would then see the benefit of. The right kids would come into the program and then do way better than they would have prior. Program changes, marketing changes that might have seemed like, just punctuation changes to some people, that was life-changing for other kids. So loved that. But then in that role, I got my feet wet in coaching because I was coaching academic units on how to do marketing. In modern higher ed, you don't get to just be a faculty member by yourself and never talk to the people who want to bring in students. At a small school, everyone does everything at some level. So I was coaching the academic department leaders on how to write advertising paragraphs, how to structure their programs to benefit their clients, the students, but not oversell themselves, not overpromise, and not to think of themselves too highly. So that was how I got into the persona of coaching, even though I didn't know it. My wife and I got pregnant with our second child. She wanted to stay at home. Some things were happening in the office. And so I transitioned quickly after a long time, trying to figure out how did I want to even move forward. I knew that my wife wanted to stay home. I knew that I couldn't demand a 50% raise at a small school. And so I decided to resign and start my own coaching business because I love this.
Yeah.
I love life transformation. I love business transformation. And probably the biggest thing that I want my clients to get is radical benefit internally, but also to their customers by just getting a few fundamental things right.
Yeah.
And so often, I'm sure you see this the same thing with your coaching, people are so close to what they're doing, they haven't had a chance to pick their head up for a moment, breathe, and see, the forest for the trees in reverse, right? They need to be able to see what we can see externally. And so as a coach, I love it because I'm not actually doing the work of any of these companies. I'm helping them do their work better.
Yeah.
It's the teaching to fish instead of fishing for them.
Yeah.
Which is some other consulting firms, they just go in and do it all. But then the company, once they're gone, they haven't learned anything necessarily.
Yeah.
But as a coach, I can do the hand slapping, but I can also do the loving nudge in a direction and see the transformation.
Yeah, so a lot to unpack there. One of my first questions or thoughts that comes from that is most educators don't have the, we'll say, gumption to strike out on their own. Like their risk tolerance is part of the reason. Obviously, they have a passion for the youth, educating, teaching, having an impact on young lives. And it's also more of a safety play, right? Like there's not the upside, but you have more consistency in your role. So what gave you the courage or gumption to really strike out on your own?
Two things. I'm a huge fan of Donald Miller. And so I used his story brand marketing framework, messaging framework internally in the university. And so I had read his book all the way back in 2017, right after it came out. And so I started just passively following Don and his migration from writing memoirs to doing marketing, messaging, to small business management and coaching. And so I'm like, while I'm in my career track, I'm watching someone else take all the risks and forge the path and maybe fail a few times. I don't know. I haven't talked with him about it, but I watched Don's transformation from writer to small business enthusiast. And then a few of my friends after graduation, they were doing the same thing. They were going from, they had accounting degrees that they were really aspiring to get into some of the big firms. Some of them were business management. They wanted to get into management roles, but then they found that they would rather have the speed of the small business owner, the entrepreneur. And so I started to get an affinity for local small business as well. And my family enjoys small town America, and decided, you know what, a lot of these places would be open longer and have better products if someone externally from them would just coach them in a few small fundamental business mentality. And when it all kind of converged at the moment of the team having turnover at the university, my wife being pregnant and wanting to stay home for the kids, it just kind of all coalesced around, you know what, small business is probably where I should go.
Yeah.
And to what you said, I got to the point where I wanted the ability to work harder and earn more faster, instead of having the steady income, because the steady income wasn't going to be enough to be able to continue the lifestyle that we had, and to be able to provide the things for my kids that I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, okay, so my back's up against the wall. What am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I did omit one thing. I did apply for a bunch of jobs and I got very little response. And part of that's because corporate only wants to see certain resume checkboxes. A lot of them are using software to sift through those resumes, and my resume wasn't going to fill those checkboxes because of my history. And so I was like, you know what? I know I have value to give. There's a confidence that I have knowing that I can help people because they have problems that I love to solve. And I, as a director formerly, I would welcome someone else doing something that I didn't want to do, but I knew it needed to be done. And so there's that like combination of factors that was like, you know what, coaching's the thing to do. And doing it for myself just seems like the best way to do it, because there's going to be the learnings of a starting business, not just the benefits of being a small business owner.
100%. But it's still a big risk because you go from a guaranteed income.
Yeah.
Well, nothing's guaranteed.
Right.
But steady income, we'll replace that word, to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you did to equip yourself and your family, or did you literally make the jump and build the parachute on the way down?
I resigned with a 6-month off ramp. So I said, let me get some of my things personally in order. And I got my team ready for me to resign as well. They were doing some strategic planning within the executive team as well. And so my replacement in communications ended up being a vice president instead of a director. And I had a lot of satisfaction in leaving well. I know a lot of people in today's market are kind of cutthroat about it, and I don't blame them for it. You need to protect your family. You need to protect your mental sanity. But I had gotten to know these people so well. I wanted to leave the place better than I started in it.
Yeah.
And so I did that.
That should be a rule for everyone.
Right. And so like that's just my personal value. So I did that with 6 months lead time so that I could end well in my role, but also it gave me a lot of time to go through 2 certification programs so that I had some curriculum at my disposal. Both companies that I had already interacted with extensively for my career. That was the Full Focus company from Michael and Megan Hyatt. And then the Business Made Simple coaching career certification. And those gave me a great foundation to then add any of my proprietary information that I wanted to do. And then have a little bit of a network, the community of other coaches doing the same sort of thing, just in different geographic location. I have loved the transition from a very competitive environment higher ed is all looking for the same kids. Now, all universities have their niche that they're trying to get with their legacy alumni students or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's only so many kids in America or the world to pull from. And so everything's very, very tight competition. Coaching is so not that case so far, in my experience. You have clients that you're looking for. I have clients that I'm looking for, and most of them are not going to overlap.
Yeah.
And so I'm perfectly willing to sit down and talk with you and even maybe share some of the things that I'm doing that can help you with your clients, because they're never going to look to me for a contract, and the vice versa. So I have really enjoyed the affirmation that this is a great culture community to be working in. And we need higher ed. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you also mentioned that you're a middle manager or middle management, and you're working closely with the executive team. So let's talk about some of the diplomacy that requires, right? Yeah. So you're working with, your bosses tightly. And I think this is a good lesson for everyone, because there's always going to be someone above us, unless you're in a true entrepreneurial role, which the Spartan audience has a lot of that. And part of the reason that we become entrepreneurs is to not have our own boss, so we be our own boss. But there is diplomacy required, regardless of where you're at in your life. So speak to those that have bosses that have people that they should be giving feedback to, but might be scared to.
The two major components that I developed into my persona at work was I always wanted to make my boss look good, right? If my boss looks good, we get things accomplished as a division, as a department, because he is going to have the cultural capital with the other executives. So he's a vice president. So if all the other vice presidents know that our division, our enrollment division, our communications department is dependable, we're going to be able to accomplish more. And so it's always about making sure that the actual decision maker has the tools that he needs to make those decisions, as opposed to trying to be me. A lot of middle managers make this mistake. They're trying to be viewed as killer employees, or they want to be able to rise the ranks for some kind of personal accomplishment or whatever, but they get it backwards. If you're pushing yourself, people see that you're pushing yourself. But if people see that you're pushing the team through your boss, then people are a lot more likely to come to you for a solution for new projects, which just snowballs in your professional career. So
it's like, is it me or we?
Exactly. So that's a huge component. The second one was that I never wanted to trash talk down the chain, right, of command. And this is a huge shift for me personally, because I had listened to a lot throughout my career of people who would come back from a meeting and say, the decision didn't go our way, and here's the 19 reasons why I think that's stupid. I decided that conversation, when I was receiving it as a grad assistant, as a student, as a grad assistant, as a lower level employee, it actually made me respect the person who was complaining a lot less. And I wasn't any more informed as to why the decision was made that way. And so I decided that I wasn't going to complain down. If I'm going to complain, I'm going to complain up the chain. And I was amazed at how it took me a while to get used to it, right? Because if you're a complainer, it's hard to stop complaining. But when I started complaining up the chain of command, actually things started happening, because people up the chain didn't know that there were problems. And so once I got over being scared of my superiors because of whatever reason, personalities, reprisals, institutional culture, whatever it is, once I got over that, things started happening. Projects started being given to me in my department. I was able to make a lateral move. Like, that was my suggestion. When I had the gumption to go and say to my superiors, you know what, I think that the guy who's doing that and I should switch spots. So we literally did a bait and switch, right? So I went from being director of recruitment to being director of communications, and the director of communications took my role in recruitment. And I said, here are the facts. Here are the outputs, the benefits. And this is how the team is benefited by us making the switch. It wasn't a complaint that he wasn't doing his job. That was me being forward thinking and going, I could either lay into my boss for the role not being filled well by that person, or I could suggest the solution and go and do it myself and learn and grow and fail. But the team is going to be benefited because I know if he makes the switch to my role, that things are going to be a lot better for him and for the team as well. So those two simple things, be solutions oriented, is probably a distillation of that by not complaining. And if you're going to complain up, it's just, it's a radical transformation of your career.
But if you're going to complain up, I would go with a solution as well.
Exactly.
Not just a complaint.
Right. Some bosses are okay with you complaining without a solution if you're having a bad day. Some aren't. I've had both.
Yeah.
But both of them, even if they were okay with me complaining without a solution, would prefer that I come with a solution.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good principle. And the other thing you mentioned there, and I want to make sure we key in on this point, because one of my key rules for my leadership team, and I now parlay this to all the leadership teams that I coach, is what happens in this meeting stays in this meeting, right? So we're not, very rarely will we ever get a consensus.
Yeah.
Right? So let's say there's 10 people in the room on the leadership, or it's a committee, it's a leadership team or a committee, and you're talking about a solution. And 8 of you agree that this is the way to go. The other 2 don't. So it doesn't go your way, as you mentioned before. Those 2 people leave the room and start complaining about, hey, it didn't go this way. And then let's say the solution doesn't work out. And those 2 people start saying, well, I told you so.
Yeah.
That does nothing for the culture but hurt it. Right? So once the leadership team comes to a resolution on something, everyone has to have each other's back. Because the next go around, those 2 people could get their way. Right. And you don't want the same thing happening in return.
Right.
So once we come out of that room, we're aligned.
Yeah.
Right. So we hashed out we got to the root of the problem. We hashed it all out. We think this is the best way forward. No one knows for certain, but we come to agreement that this is going to be the best way forward. And it's a majority decision, or there's an executive in the room that makes the final decision. At the end of the day, it's their ass on the line.
Right.
So you got to focus on what is right, not who is right.
And I think an important component to that is that it's actually really relationally adolescent to complain to people on the back end of that kind of situation, because what you're looking for is the affirmation that you were right, even though it didn't go your way. And so you're going to go to other people who weren't in the conversation and weren't a part of the decision-making process. And most likely the people you complain to are your friends. And so you're going to be, I'm going to feel good because I'm going to go talk to these people who are going to make me feel good. And they're going to be frustrated with the other ones and they'll have my back. But the problem is you just sowed discord between your division and someone else's division. And it's not just the leadership team that needs to be cohesive. It's the line employees under the leadership teams that need to be cohesive. And in an institution like Maranatha, everyone's in close quarters. So it's not even like your divisions are all separated where there wouldn't be that kind of cross conversation. No. If I go out of a meeting and I complain, 4 minutes later, that person's going to go and complain to someone else. It's a trickle down effect. And You're exactly right. It's a culture problem now because you have now elevated your opinion over the goals and the mission of the organization.
Yep. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, what's a more powerful conversation to hear? Is it, hey, we came out of this, the leadership team decided this, and this is what we think is best. We had a lot of discord around it. We had a lot of discussion, and we think this is going to be the best path forward. Or the leadership team decided this. I think they're freaking idiots.
Yeah.
I can't believe they didn't go with my solution.
Right.
Like, just being in that conversation, if you're a normal human being with any rational thought, you're going to be like, wait, what? Well, why am I in this? Why are you telling me this?
Yeah.
I can have an opinion. Like, it's just interesting. Like, but it happens all the time.
What I've broken it down to other aspiring or new leaders too before is, are you looking for a functional team or a quasi loyal team. I say quasi loyal because it's not actually good loyalty that you end up with. It's negative loyalty that you end up with. But you want your team to be team minded for the whole institution. And if you come out of that meeting and you say, this is what we decided, this is how we're going to make it work, this is how everyone else is going to make it work, you've now rallied everyone around a solution that maybe you don't fully agree with yourself, but your explanation of the solution to someone else ingrains it into your head to believe it more. The more you say something, the more you sell something, the more you believe in something.
Yep.
And you are tricking yourself even mentally into making it a solution instead of a problem.
Yep. Well, actually, one of the things that I like to focus on that a lot of people don't give enough attention or pay much credence to is cascading messages. Like that leadership team, when a decision is made, especially if it's a big one, what do you want the messaging to be from each leader coming out of that room? It's like they may not say it the exact same way, but they got to have a theme to that message that's coming out. This decision was made. This is why we think it's best. This is where we're headed. And everyone on the front line is going to be like, okay.
Right. Yeah. Messaging is one of my sweet spots. Like I really enjoy messaging internally, especially. External messaging is so focused on clients, onboarding, getting them into the fold. And there's a lot of tricks and tips to external messaging. But I often tell people if you can focus internally first, the external stuff will start to fix itself. Because once you have a good identity that's cohesive on your internal messaging, it starts to bleed into other components as well. And just by taking an extra 10 minutes at the end of a meeting, especially if it was a contentious meeting, which is good, contentious meetings can be very good, but taking that extra 10 minutes is going to make the solution, the acceptance of that solution for the broader team so much easier. Because you as the leader of the committee, the leadership team, whatever it is, if you as the leader are providing the talking points to then parlay down to the rest of the team, you're positioning your middle manager as authoritative with your words. Instead of your middle manager having to come up with ways of agreeing with something that they don't agree with necessarily, if you give them the framework to say, here's how this benefits everyone. And it may not be an immediate benefit. It might be a trickle-down benefit months, quarters, years away. That's hard. But if you give them the liberty by giving them that messaging, that middle manager is probably not going to oppose you as much as they might have ahead of time.
Yeah.
And that's your responsibility as the leader.
Yeah, absolutely. They got to know why and where you're going. So there has to be the vision and why you're going there.
Right.
And if they're bought into the why, they'll go.
Right. And most people who are middle managers that I have experienced actually want to be told what they need to do. That it's not that gumptious, like presumptive people aren't middle managers, because I was one too, and I had a lot of ideas of how things ought to go. But even within my my active mind, my creative spirit, I still wanted to be given the ways in which to succeed. And so I think it's lazy leadership to not give people the tools of communication after even a positive meeting, right? Because those positive moments can 10x your culture in a good way. Yeah. Not just the negative spots.
Yeah. And you want to reinforce those positive behaviors and thoughts.
Right.
Versus the negative ones. Because otherwise the negative ones just breed automatically.
Yeah. And it's hard to get away from those negative pockets in a culture without someone leaving. And those conversations are hard, right? It's a phrase that's come back in the last couple of months of my life is choose your hard. Is it easier to, in the moment, be a little lazy in your communication style? Yes, but it's going to make your life harder down the road. It's better to take the time and effort in the difficulty of clear communication on the front end, because it'll make the life on the back end much easier.
Yeah. Choose your heart is a really, really good paradigm for most people to pay attention to. I mean, take it to health is like, is it easier to stay in bed in the morning and not get up and work out?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it harder to have diabetes and heart issues in life because you didn't do that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, choose your heart. It's hard to get out of bed and go get a workout in.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder to live overweight and with diabetes and other health issues.
Right.
So you choose your heart.
It's a good paradigm for lots of life, not just leadership.
Yep. 100%.
Right.
So you have a real good focus on strategic planning.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that.
Yes.
So let's talk through some key steps. I'll let you take this where you want to take it because it's your asset and strength. So let's go.
One of the things that I learned in the nonprofit space is that nonprofits, almost everyone in a nonprofit can tell you exactly why they come to work. For some reason, nonprofits are better at communicating mission and
there's
values.
A cause.
Right. But even like leadership teams are better at it because maybe it's because of the more rigorous process of choosing leadership teams in a nonprofit, because those leaders are probably not in it for a lot of money. You know, these leaders have a daily reason to keep the ship moving forward. So taking that into the small business space, that's lacking. That mission-focused, daily active perspective is lacking because a lot of times people are in love with what they're selling, not with the solution that they're offering. I have some friends that love to create, physical textile products. They love the process of woodworking. They love the process of dyeing fabrics and yarns and stuff like that. These folks are in love with their craft. And I hate to say it to people like that, but your love of your craft is not going to sell your product, because people don't really care how much you love something unless it benefits them. And if you can position your love of something as a benefit to other people, it's a small shift in perspective and in messaging. But if you can position that as a solution to someone's problem, now they've started to care. Because instead of it being your cool thing that you do, now it's authority and it's empathy and it's positioning as a benefit as opposed to just this cool, maybe like luxury at a distance thing that maybe if I get to a certain point in my life, I'll be able to afford it. But it takes planning. It takes intentional thought to set up a vision for what you want for your company and what you want for your customers. So I tell my clients that you need to have both a vision and a mission. A vision is a state of being that you want to get to. It's something that you probably never will get to because you're always planning for 10 years down the road and you're wanting to improve, you're to grow. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want to grow the size of your business, but you want to improve the perspective. You want to improve your effectiveness. You want to grow in your capacity to be good at what you're doing. So growth isn't just size or in revenue. It can mean a lot of different things. But that 10-year vision down the road, it's the goalpost. It's the target that you're always aiming at, but you're never getting to.
The goalpost is a great analogy. Sorry to cut you off, but I know you got a lot more. So we're on a football field. That goalpost, let's say we're on the 1 yard line. Okay, well, that goalpost is actually 100 yards away.
Yeah.
Right? And we got to get 10 yards to get a first down, and another 10 yards to get a first down, another 10, another 10, all the way down to actually score the touchdown. So how do we then back into getting to that end zone? So how do we take those steps?
And that's where I think a mission comes in, right? So I actually just recently, probably in the last 2 or 3 years, have started to believe that a mission statement should be time bound instead of timeless. Your vision is timeless. It's something that you're always chasing. And even in the analogy of a football game, it doesn't matter how many times you get to the goalpost, until the time's up, you're trying to get to the next one. Okay. And in continuing this analogy, your mission is to get to the next first down. Your mission is movable, right? Once I've accomplished this, now we have a new mission. and a new mission. And I don't have a background in military, but I've heard military people explain it this way as well. Missions are, they're capped. There's an end to a mission. If you don't ever end your mission, there's a problem. You have a goal to accomplish, right? And if you've accomplished the goal, the mission is complete. Then you do your after action review, you improve, and you get the new assignments. Okay, the same thing should be for a business. You always have a goal that you're headed towards. You have targets that you're headed towards for your company, but your team needs to know that there's a revenue proposition. There are some benefits that we're trying to gain internally. And then there's a why statement that's tied into your mission, to your vision. So my why statement gives me the motivation and the discipline, but the economic value gives me the more tangible, what am I actually doing? It's I'm moving yard goal. Okay, now we move the chains and we're going to do that again. And even within businesses, if you don't have a shorter term stacking effect, it can get really discouraging to only have a vision. And this is where a lot of people get the mission statement wrong, in my opinion. If your mission statement is unattainable, it's actually discouraging. Because what are we even doing here? It's a hard day. The clients hate us. We've had to return a bunch of stuff. We kept messing up on this thing, or this quarter didn't return the benefit that we needed it to. But if we break down our mission to being shorter term, we're setting more attainable yet stretch goals, as opposed to the stretch goal of solving world hunger. Okay, if the vision is solving world hunger, how are you going to do that? You're going to take a geographic region, and we're going to really focus on this region first. And then once we've gotten that region benefited, we're going to move to another one. And it's the same thing for businesses, especially small businesses. You don't have a full-time strategic planner, right? Some larger corporations, they have entire wings of their operation that all they're doing is saying, what are we doing next? What are we doing next? But as a small business owner, you need to take a step out, and even you need to take a step that says, this is where I am today in relation to where we should be 4 months from now, 4 years from now, and when I want to retire or sell the business. That process doesn't actually take super creative work. It takes honesty. It takes an ability to set aside all the limiting beliefs of the moment that says it's possible that we do that. Is it probable? I don't know. How can we make it more probable? Well, if we start to stack some things well, and we've built the foundation, all of a sudden those unattainable goals become very attainable.
Yeah.
And that's what a coach can do for a small business leader who's kind of stuck, who isn't sure what to do next. They know they can make 4 more tables and that they're going to be received wildly in overwhelming success, but they don't know if those 4 tables are getting them anywhere down the field.
Yeah, 100%. So good. The strategy piece there, they just missed, and I'm one of these people where I'll jump out of a plane and figure it out on the way down.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my natural being. I've done that, for 20 years in entrepreneurship and to a great success. But excuse me, I've always had great mentors, great coaches, and I've always invested in myself to help keep that in line. And I still do. I'm a coach that has multiple coaches and masterminds that I'm a part of. And I'm always being coachable.
Yeah.
If there's a coach out there that doesn't have their own coach, that isn't a part of these groups, that isn't learning, that's not a coach you should work with. Firm belief.
Yeah.
So you should inquire as you're thinking about coaches or potentially having a coach in your life, how are they continuing to level up?
Yeah.
These strategies that you're talking about don't come secondhand to most people. And like you mentioned before, actually, I think it was before we got on camera, is, as business owners, we're so close to the forest, we can't see the trees.
Yeah.
Right. So we're blinders are on because we're just going, or we're running our head up against the ceiling, and we got to figure out ways to get through. Well, having a great coach that asks questions. I use this analogy in teaching leadership teams. Let's say you're traversing through the Amazon forest and you got your whole leadership team in tow. Well, anyone that knows anything about the Amazon forest, it is thick and it is massive and the trees are tall and you're trying to get from point A to point B. If someone doesn't climb a tree and look where they're going, A, they're going to be zigzagging and taking a longer route. B, they're not going to see if there's potential danger ahead. And C, they may not be going in the right direction. So like just this morning, I was recording one of my rec talks that I do every morning, just a 2-minute message. And I was talking about, are you running enthusiastically in the wrong direction? And it's a question that it's a really powerful one because a lot of times we just think forward is forward. But if we're, let's say, back to your analogy, we're running this, we have this vision, we have this mission, and we also have goals, and we think we have a really good goal that we're going after, but it actually doesn't align with the vision or mission. It's either a low-hanging fruit or something that we think was going to be the right, and no one checks in to go, hey, is that actually aligned with where we want to go? Or was that just a quick money-making venture? And that question isn't asked if you're not getting out of your business to work on your business or have good guidance from a coach. It can be troublesome and lead you down some really wrong paths.
And I see this example played out in mentality with cash flow problems, especially. Like you can tell a lot about a company by what they're doing to keep cash reserves on hand. If they discount and they wholesale and they're going to back to doing that, they're trying to fuel their account so that they can move forward on maybe their debt payments or paying the people that they have, right? But they're not actually taking a step back to say, you know what, we need to fix long-term cash flow problems. They're probably doing the same thing with their leadership structure and with their strategic planning, is that they're not planning at all. One of my favorite things to tell clients is everyone has a strategy. It's just that some people that have an intentional strategy. Your strategy may be no planning. It's just make the plane as soon as we go. We take off and we got to build everything around it. Or it's the jump out of the airplane model. You got to build the parachute, sew the parachute while you're following. That is a strategy, but
it's not a great one.
Not a great one. It's not a good one.
From first-hand experience, I'll tell you, it's not the best one.
Right. So instead of letting someone else set your strategy for you, you do it. And especially for owners, CEOs, COOs, that's your responsibility. No one else can do it. Someone else can give you a plan, and it can be great. It can be beautiful. It can be intuitive. It can incorporate the best of the modern terms for whatever business management, philosophy is being espoused today. But unless the top dog does it, no one else is going to actually invest in it. One of the great relationships that I was able to forge in my time at Maranatha was with the CEO. And it's interesting because not very many universities have a CEO. They have a president, they have a provost, and they have a lot of committees. But I loved having a CEO and a president because it allowed there to be this focus of we need to actually manage this institution of higher learning as a business, because our students will not benefit from it if we don't have this thing figured out financially, structurally, in a business format. But he and I would talk about the responsibility of a CEO can get kind of lonely. It can get kind of discouraging, because if you're doing your job well as a CEO, you're fixing problems and you're forging new paths forward. And that's kind of a tight tension to feel, because you're always dreaming and you're solving the worst of the worst. So your day can go from, or your week can go from beautiful new ideas and optimistic meetings to, are you kidding me? Like, we're still worried about this thing. But having a strategic plan keeps you online when you experience the wildly different components to being a leader. And not having that plan will make the rest of the institution only as good as your emotional capacity. And that's a bad place to be in for a company. Even if you have an emotionally intelligent, highly competitive, pushy, CEO that's really doing things well, everything being dependent on that person means that everything has to run through that person, even if that's not what's stated. That's an unwritten rule that will cost you a lot.
A ton. And we see it far too often. And CEOs put themselves in that position.
Yes.
Instead of actually developing and empowering their leaders, they end up being the end-all be-all, which causes them an inordinate amount of stress.
Yeah.
And it's just, they don't realize that they're the problem. So oftentimes I'll tell businesses and teams as I go into there is like, hey, all the great things that you guys have going on right now, because of you. Bad news, all the problems and issues that you have, also because of you.
Yes.
And it's just a realization and a level set for these, especially CEOs, entrepreneurs, presidents, whatever they are, to understand that, hey, it's a dichotomy.
Yeah.
And you're responsible for all the good and all the bad.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, the buck stops with you. So if your leaders aren't performing up to your standard, it's because of you.
Right. One of the focuses of my practice is I like to work with leadership teams. Leadership teams over solopreneurs have much more to offer to business at large. There's a capacity that's not just so if you have a leadership team of 2 or 3, you're not actually just doubling or tripling your capacity. You're probably 10 or 20xing your capacity as a business.
Well, it's the power of the yoke, right?
Right.
So when you put, whether it's an Amish farmer or just back in olden times, you put 2 oxen or 2 horses together on that yoke, the power increases 10x.
Right. So I prefer to work with leadership teams because it actually safeguards you against everything just being as particular as someone's persona. So my background in theology wouldn't necessarily lend itself to being a CEO by myself of a company that didn't value the background that I have. But if I had that background, which has given me a lot, plus a CFO that's really intelligent, plus a COO that has a great project management background or whatever it is, all of a sudden my theology background can be an asset instead of a liability. But if I'm trying to do the work of a CEO and a CFO and a COO all myself, now I'm in a bad way because now I'm required to be excellent at something that I honestly don't even have an introductory knowledge on. And so it's not that I won't work with people who are companies that have only one leader, but I much prefer to work with companies that have a team, because a team, there's just intangible benefits on top of the tangible benefits that are really hard to explain.
Yeah. Well, let's talk through some core values quick and how you go about working with teams on those. Because I think most teams that us coaches go into have some sort of core values, whether they're written or not.
Yes.
Core values exist.
Yeah.
So how do you approach that? I have some unique ways that I approach it through EOS learnings and my own personal learnings, owning businesses for 20 years, but curious as to your thoughts.
Well, there's 3 filtering questions that I make teams look at when it comes to values. Are you trying to force your personal values into a business? Are you actually describing critical daily actions with a core value? And is this a value that you think your clients want versus what you actually are? These are really tough questions for a team to look through and then look at their maybe list of 9 values at, and all of a sudden they only have one value. If you get rid of all the stuff, the trappings for marketing purposes or PR purposes, if you get rid of all the trappings of the CEO's favorite buzz term and start to focus on values that we actually are, this is the fiber of who our company is, you're going to have a lot fewer than you think. But the good thing is you can be radical about those values. So let's say, for instance, my least favorite core value, any guesses?
Integrity.
Yes.
Boom.
You know why? Because that is pay to play, brother.
Yeah.
Integrity as a core value. And I will allow people to keep it because arguing against it is difficult. But I'll tell you, it is my least favorite core value because that is table stakes. I
100% agree. And I'll let you continue, but I got to give this example for everyone. Do you know what Enron's one core value was?
No.
Integrity. How'd that work out?
That did not work out.
And for you youngsters listening,
man.
If you don't know the downfall of Enron and what they did to screw over their employees, customers, and everyone involved, they certainly did not act with integrity.
No.
You're right. It's pay to play.
It is table stakes. And I have a good friend who he wanted to keep integrity on his core value set. And I said, that's fine. But let me tell you, it shouldn't be the first one that people see. Other things need to be the first thing that
it was the first one people saw for Enron.
And then guess what? It is the companies failing is one of the biggest cultural problems for people in trust, because companies have said, you can depend on us, and then you can't. And then it's hard for customers to depend on any other company. So instead of table stakes for your core values, it ought to be something that describes your company. So a good core value is scrappy. Okay, that's a good one, because what it implies for your employees is that you need to be solutions oriented. You need to be able to put together something that works out of pieces that you don't think are going to make something work. Because it describes an action, and it describes a state of being for your employees, but it's also something that you kind of have to chase. You'll never finish being scrappy. A value is something that you can exist in. You can identify in your employees. And I encourage leaders to promote employees, not necessarily in a positional promotion, but you need to be able to give praise to your employees who are living out your values. But it shouldn't be something that you're ever finished doing. So scrappy is a favorite value of mine for small businesses, because you're never going to have the corporate structure that keeps you from being scrappy.
Yeah, you could also use the word grit there if you like that, because it's become buzzy.
Yes. I know a lot of nonprofits have a value of compassion. And I think that's a good value as well, because it's implying that you need to exhibit this when you don't feel like it, right? You need to listen more. You need to be okay with someone having an emotional breakdown in a situation, because you need to get past that with them, right? Compassion is something you'll never be finished exhibiting. But even just practically, I tell people you shouldn't have any more than 3 values. It's difficult to focus a team on exhibiting any more than 3 things at any time. If you split their brains, their hearts further than 3, they're probably not actually going to try for any of them, because it seems hopeless. Well, I can't accomplish this idealized team member that you guys want, so I might as well just not give it a shot for any of them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, so in EOS world, we utilize 3 to 7, no more than 7. And we use that with rocks. We use that with goals. We use that with everything. Less is more so 3 is less is more. That being said, one of the best company cultures that I know I'm an ambassador for is First Form, and they have 11. But they didn't start there.
Yeah.
They didn't start with 11. Now they've grown to, thousands and billions of dollars of revenue and all that different stuff, but they didn't start with 11. They grew to 11. I was with Vortex yesterday. Actually, I want to give this example. I was at Vortex Optics yesterday, and they have 4 core values, and 2 of them I know off the top of my head, but I'm going to pull up my phone because these are great examples. A lot of times we utilize one words, like you were using scrappy, or we talked about integrity. I did that at first as well. I got out like an adjective list. I sat with the leadership team. We're like, what do we embody, right? The other thing you mentioned is, are we doing this for our customers? Or what was the question you asked?
So are you presenting a value that your customers want you to exhibit?
Yeah.
Or is this something that your employees need to do?
Yeah. So what I call that, or what Patrick Lencioni rather has taught me, is that's an aspirational value. It's not something you embody. It's something that you want to embody. Right. And that's aspirational. We talked about the pay to play, which is another trap, but aspirational is also a trap. because it's not something that you're truly embodying, that means by definition, it's not a core value.
Right.
It means something that's an aspiration, right? So it has to be something that you embody. And so before I get to Vortex's core values, I want to explain the exercise that I take people through. We, as a leadership team, will sit there and I'll say, I want you guys to think of your 3 best employees. And they can't be sitting at this table. So the leadership team's in the room. Now I want you to write down all the characteristics that describe those 3 people you're thinking of. Take 5 quiet minutes. Okay, and then we'll write those on the whiteboard. All right, now I want you to think of your worst employee. Don't say their name, just quietly write down all those characteristics. Right, so then when we go back to the board and look at the good characteristics of the 3 best employees, like these 3 people, if we had 100 of these, we could conquer the world. What are the common threads that we can identify here that are actually being embodied in your culture as we speak today?
Yeah.
Okay, and there may be words, there may be phrases. Well, a lot of us get trapped in just having a one-word value. So this is Vortexes, and this is a great example, and First Form uses these as well. I do as well. So one of them is be the buffalo. We have an entrepreneur, and then they go on to describe it, right? So even if you kept integrity, like you let your friend keep integrity, people have infinite definitions of integrity.
Yes.
I have my definition, you have your definition, your buddy probably has his.
Right.
You have to define that, what it means to you, no matter what the core value you choose to have. So be the buffalo. I've used this on the podcast before. Many people have heard the terminology. The bison, the American bison or buffalo, is one of the only animals, if not the only animal, that charges the storm versus the cow that walks away from the storm. The reason they charge the storm, they're going to go through an uncomfortable period, but it's going to be less than the cow that's going to be in it for longer because they're going through the storm because they know they're going to be through it faster. So then they go on to describe it. We have an entrepreneurial spirit. We constantly seek new and innovative ways to improve our service, products, and performance. We're courageous. We evolve, take chances, embrace change, and grow. We are not dictated by fear, difficult odds, or the status quo. That ended up rhyming. I'm sure some marketing guy had some input there. Another one, willingness to shovel the snow. We have a culture of humility. No job, task, or person is beneath us.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Customer is king. This is the third one. Customers are the lifeblood of our business and are treated like gold. We maintain a level of service that far exceeds customers' expectations. And if you know anything about Vortex and their very important promise, which is what they call their warranty, they will replace anything. And they display these cases all over their buildings, their warehouses, their shooting range. Like, these are stories of things they replaced that most companies would look at and be like, no.
Yeah.
You demolished that. You dropped it off a cliff. You whatever. Like, that's not in our, but Vortex is like, no, we're going to replace it. Lifetime warranty. But they call it a very important promise, not a lifetime warranty. And the last one is about you. Our golden rule. We align ourselves with the needs and interests of others, not just our own. This is the foundation which all of our values are built upon. So I actually read those in reverse. The about you is first. And so to your point, what you list first does matter.
Yes, it does. What I tell people is your values will tell a bigger story if you don't exhibit them than if you do exhibit them. So we as customers, we like the Vortex story of being able to say, you know what? I actually was the problem, but they fixed it for me. We hate the stories where the business was the problem, but we still couldn't get our problem solved because the business didn't want to pony up on something big or something small. You will get more PR off of failing to live out your values. So condense the values that you have to a shorter list that is achievable in the individual actions. It may not be attainable in a concrete always ever setting, but it's something that you can point to and say that we're doing right now. And not just, you can't just say to your employees, congratulations, you're exhibiting this now. This is also how you set yourself up for success in hiring and firing, in interviews,
promotions,
in decision making, in strategic planning. Having values that are baked into your fiber are like creative constraints of a lane of a runner. I can't get out of my lane. This is where we are. We as a company exist in this lane. And you don't have to make it a negative on other people statement as well. That's a trap of getting this right. You can get the values of your company solidified, and you can get your company employees really around them. But then you need to be okay with other companies existing in other lanes. Bad PR doesn't usually work well for small businesses. It might for big businesses, but it doesn't for small businesses. We're a part of communities.
Mm-hmm.
So be for something and you'll find a tribe.
Yeah, all press is not good press for small companies.
No. So I always tell my friends, my clients, be for something instead of against something, and you'll find a tribe that follows. A company that you as an individual, as a leader, being against something, you will find a tribe, but that tribe will eventually discard you as well, because they'll eventually be against you. Being around a group of people that's negative is detrimental. So as a company, choosing your values is like choosing the people that you want to be with.
Yeah.
And that's more important than some kind of branding opportunity.
Well, and your values are going to lead. So when you have an incredible culture that is led by values, the people that you may make a mistake and hire a wrong person that doesn't exhibit those values, they, interviews are like dates.
Yeah.
You're getting to know them. They're putting their best foot forward. I always use the analogy when I was teaching my leaders as they're recruiting. I was like, think of a first interview like a first date. You're going to get their SportsCenter top 10.
Yes.
You're not going to find out their SportsCenter bottom 10 until 6 months in.
Yeah.
And all the shit that they bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You got their highlight reel in the interviews, because that's how we show up. We're in an interview. I'm trying to get this job. I'm trying to win.
Right.
So I'm going to show you all the stuff that I'm really good at, not all the stuff I suck at, or all the character flaws that I have. Right. So, but when you insert that wrong person into your culture and you have a really strong culture, the culture will weed them out.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be like, oh, yeah. I don't belong here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then that actually saves you a lot of time, because you're not having to have those uncomfortable conversations where you're having to terminate someone or having to coach them into having the right values when they just don't exhibit them or don't want to embody them.
Yeah.
So it's the culture leads.
Right.
And if you have a really strong value set that everyone is embodying, if the wrong person slips through the cracks, they get out quick.
Yeah. Right. And a lot of managers get this wrong when they are first managing, right? And there's merits of using manager and leader, but especially just a middle manager or the first time supervisor, they get this wrong. They get the pinch point of needing people. You need hands doing the jobs for needing the right hands doing the jobs. It's the choose your hard situation. Would you rather be down a set of hands that potentially is demolishing all of your productivity for whatever reason? Or would you rather, I said that wrong. Would you rather keep someone who's demolishing your productivity, or would you rather get rid of them, be down a set, and actually increase your productivity?
Yeah.
Choose your heart. And your values will help you choose where you are in this situation.
Yeah, 100%. Actually, one last thing there's a lot of things that stood out yesterday. Every time I visit Vortex, I learn something new. Fortunate to have a relationship with those guys. And Joe Hamilton, their CEO, yesterday was talking about their call center. First of all, they'll never have AI because they want real humans to talk to real humans. Mm. But in that call center that's dealing with customers, they want to have a bias towards solving. Mm. Right. So they got to love the customer and love what they do, love the products they deliver, but also finding a reason even if the person on the, like you're, let's say, Jonathan, you're on the call center and you know that I'm calling in and you know that I'm full of shit. Like I ruined this binoculars or this rifle scope or whatever it may be. Like you got to find a reason. What they want is for you to find a reason to help and solve the solution versus this guy's full of shit. Like we're not going to replace it. We know he broke it on his own.
Yeah.
He did nothing happen. He broke it because they want to make sure that they permeate the customer is king and permeate because it's insidious, right? If you start taking that attitude that every person that calls is full of shit, then that's going to permeate and it's going to continue to compound.
Right.
Versus, hey, no, and does that happen? I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. But is it a fraction of a percent?
Yeah.
Yes. And so would you rather take care of them and have them speak so highly of you and your product, knowing that you're going to take a loss on that for a fraction of a percent of the people that call in? That's a win.
Yeah. I tell people, just to connect the dots here, I tell people that your values are not a strategy. Because a strategy might change. The tactics of something might change. But your fiber of who your company is should not change.
Yeah.
And what people will recognize in the Vortex situation is that there might be people who call in with stupid reasons and stupid stories. But guess what? There probably are 10 people, 100 people with legitimate claims and who are very willing to spend high prices on quality products that are going to outlast the one guy who comes in with a terrible story. And on a business situation, even if you were to choose this as a strategy, even though it's not a strategy, it would be a winning strategy.
Yeah.
Because that 100 of income is going to far outweigh any one negative situation. But it removes the responsibility of the employee from having to make that decision every time they pick up the phone, if they already know that the value is to be solutions first, is to keep the customer king. They don't have to make the decision. They know as soon as they pick up the phone, they don't have to spend the mental energy, the emotional energy to figure out whether or not it's right or wrong, because they're trying to find a reason to make the customer happy.
Yeah.
That is a very simple definition of productivity for that person, because they know exactly what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I'll give one other example, and this just to nail this point home, because it's so important. Because we can get jaded by the bad experiences. That one customer, me pretending to be the caller that screwed up the rifle scope or binoculars or whatever, right? We can get jaded on that. Yeah. Like, oh, this person screwed me over. And then that's the insidious part that creeps in. And we think that everyone that calls in with a complaint or a broken item is now trying to screw you over. So you have to have a bias towards that. So my other example is this. The company that I used to represent had a bias towards finding a reason to pay claims and insurance claims versus a reason not to. And I had personal experience with this with my father-in-law after he passed. His financial advisor went to the company and said, hey, I think he should have been on disability claim for mental illness. And they went out of their way to interview myself, my wife, his widow, all the family members, the financial advisor. They did basically like an investigation to find a reason to pay this claim. And they went back 10 years and paid a $500,000 claim where most companies, vast majority of companies would have been like, no way, Jose.
Yeah.
Like, no, he didn't file for it. And B, he's already dead. And C, like, he doesn't qualify. Like, we're not going to spend that. Like, think about all the money they spent to investigate whether or not they should pay this claim. Like the people that were calling and interviewing us. Right. So like they found a reason to do the right thing instead of just brushing it under the rug.
Yeah. This bias that we speak of is living out your values. Whichever value it is, there needs to be a bias towards that. And when if you have too many values, you might find they end up being conflicting. And you didn't plan it to be that way, but now you've put the responsibility on your employees to figure out which value you're supposed to be living out.
Yeah.
So it's important for leaders to choose values that they know that they can point to. Choose values that make the life of their employees better so that they can make their customers, their clients' lives better. And it's a winning way to go to work, to know that I have a role to fill, I have a mission in the short term to accomplish, and we're working towards something bigger. We have a vision for a future state that will be better, that maybe I won't actually accomplish, but maybe we will get so far down, we'll move the ball so far down the field that the people who come after me will get significantly further down as well.
Yeah, oh, for sure. All right, one last topic before we bring this home. How do you view legacy in leadership and life? It's a big question.
It is. I one of my last responsibilities at my former job was I was on the transition team from president to president. And I spent a lot of time thinking about legacy during that time. So I was communications director. So I'm writing articles, I'm doing a few interviews. Obviously, there's all the work to install the new president. And what I kind of ended up settling on for the tenor of the former president, the president emeritus, was that legacy is not something that an individual can craft. Like you cannot enter into a publicity campaign for your legacy.
That's good.
Everyone else writes your legacy for you. So if that's the case, then every day is your legacy. And what I loved about that is I had personal interactions with this gentleman as a young person, as a new employee, as a new time director, as an advanced level director, and all the interactions that I had added up to the legacy. It wasn't the individual moments. And so I think about legacy in terms of grace. People give a lot of grace to you as an individual if you are looking to accomplish something. If you have been clear on what your goals and motivations are, people will give you a lot of grace in your negative moments. But people also will remember the small things way bigger than the total, goals that you accomplished for your company. So I remember this particular leader because he stood up for me in a scholarship committee. And it's something that he didn't need to do. And I only found out about it later, secondhand, that I had benefited from him sticking up for me when, frankly, I didn't deserve it. But that second chance gave me a new lease on education and life. So I'm forever indebted to that person. And his legacy in my mind is recognizing my value when I wasn't even sure what my value was myself.
That's what a leader does.
That's what a leader does. And yes, this person, and you can talk about legacies as accomplishments, but I think a deeper meaning for a leader and legacy is leaving a culture, leaving a situation stronger than they came to it. And we alluded to that earlier, but a legacy is setting the next guy up for success, not leaving a trash can, dumpster fire behind. Because it's easy to leave things that way. When you move on for a different opportunity, it's easy to try to give people the middle finger.
Well, that happens in the corporate world all the time,
yeah.
Especially publicly traded companies.
Yeah,
CEOs know they're going to be there on average 3 years. They get what's theirs and move on.
Right. And honestly, the same thing is true for other components, but a legacy is both positive and negative. So just like a strategy, whether it's intentional or not, is a strategy, a legacy will be left no matter if you try for something or not. And so the combination of a CEO living out a company's values very publicly, very integrated, into their day-to-day operation, those values will leave a legacy themselves, because everyone in the company is looking to the CEO, to the owner, to see what do those values look like played out. We want to see that. But legacy is a human on human interaction, not a human on company interaction primarily.
Yeah.
And that looks like stopping by the receptionist and saying hi, as opposed to throwing them the keys and moving on. It looks like asking the person who's taken a couple of mental sick days to figure out if there's something that we need to shift. It looks like asking questions you don't have to, but if you do, you know there's going to be an answer that's going to take you some time. That's leaving a legacy that's positive.
Yeah.
And leaders, in my experience in my life, leaders have more responsibility to treat other people with civility and humanity. In an unfair way, they have more responsibility than anyone else in the institution. Not just because everyone else will follow suit, but because your one interaction will mean more for that person than 15 or 100 interactions from someone else who's not a leader.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to remember what you say in those moments.
Remington wanted to get in camera shot, I guess.
She goes, yeah, I'm in on it.
Yeah, for those not watching on YouTube, my dog wanted to be in on this episode. She's been good, though.
Yeah, she's been really great. She's been a great listener.
Yeah, great listener, great audience. What do you want your legacy to be?
I want people to know that I cared about my family, that I cared about them as individuals. And when we care about our family and people as individuals, the community is benefited through business, because whole people make awesome businesses, and awesome businesses help keep people whole. And I love that's small town America. That's a new version of the American dream that I have is let's make these communities that matter, that have something left for the people who come behind them, instead of a consumption mindset that doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. All right, last question I ask everyone. What's an unpopular belief you hold to be true that you think most others would disagree with you?
Unpopular belief. Okay, I want to provide a caveat for I am very patriotic. Okay, I love my country. My two favorite holidays revolve around the red, white, and blue, but America is not all that. We are flippin' arrogant. And I say that from an improvement mindset perspective. Not that I hate America. I love America. But we're the new kid on the block. And we're proving a lot of stuff. We're still very young as a country. And our responsibility, because we have come so far so fast, is greater to the rest of the world. And I don't want to get into the politics of what that looks like as an institution, the United States, but as citizens, we have a lot of work to do to prove that the things that we hold to be true actually make a difference, that actually matter.
I like it. That's good. So where can people find you, follow you? What's the best spots?
I hang out on LinkedIn a lot. So you can find me at Jonathan Sheeley or Sheeley Executive Consulting on LinkedIn. Sheeley Executive Consulting.co is my website if you want to work with me in leadership coaching. And those are probably the fastest way to get a hold of me that way. And then I hang out in coffee shops in the Watertown area and in the Lake Country area as well. You can probably find me with my headphones on. Please come up and bump me.
Interrupt him. He likes human interaction.
That's right.
Dude, it's been a pleasure getting to know you and having this conversation. I love these in-person chats. Even Remy as our audience. They just have so much impact being in person, chopping it up, giving people some great nuggets and knowledge for them, their lives and their businesses. So thanks for coming in, making the trip.
Hey, thanks for the invite.
You bet. All right, Spartans, you know what to do. Share this far and wide, especially if you got leadership teams. Like Jonathan and I both coach leadership teams. And some people may wonder, why would I have, someone else on the show like that? Because we both have different approaches and we have different styles and we have different clients. And And you can get a lot of benefit from having two brains in the room that just work all day in that stuff. And I think today's episode is great proof of that. So you know what to do. Share it far and wide. Remember that good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.